I teach, so I should be able to project that.
Okay.
So, first I want to thank Americans for restoring the Constitution, for organizing this event, as well as the Vestal Library for hosting. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here today, so thank you very much to them. As was mentioned, my name is David Pasick. I'm from the town of Schuyler, just outside of Utica. There, I teach criminology and sociology at SUNY Polytechnic Institute. Before starting at SUNY Poly, I worked as an analyst for the State's Division of Criminal Justice Services. And outside of work, I dabble in growing hops on my family's farm. If you're not familiar with hops, they were, a very broadly grown crop in this area, and they're really making a resurgence recently, which is really encouraging. I'm running for this office as an independent third-party candidate. I've been endorsed by the Libertarian Party of New York. To that end, if elected, I would seek to sponsor and support legislation that maximizes individual liberty and, where appropriate, minimizes the role of the federal government. I believe this approach is timely. As a recent Gallup poll has indicated, that the American public views government as the country's top problem. Coming in second and third are the economy and unemployment. I'd like to offer my views on these concerns, which I see as inextricably linked, and what I believe are the potential remedies for them. We're justified in our identification of our government as the country's top problem. The entrenchment of the two major parties has led to ideological polarization and gridlock in Washington. In fact, the last two congressional sessions were the least productive in history. What's troubling is that our founding fathers warned us of this. At the conclusion of his presidency, in his farewell address, George Washington said this of the two-party system: "It serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false harms, kindles the animosity of one party against another, foments occasional riot and insurrection. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption, which find a facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passions." And John Adams, our second president, said this: "There is nothing which I dread so much as the division of the republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader, and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution." Our government is plagued by the ills that Washington described. The two-party system has indeed opened the door to outside influence and corruption, as evidenced most clearly by corporate welfare. By subsidizing major corporations and creating an incredibly strict regulatory environment, the federal government has undermined free market competition and stifled entrepreneurship. Over the past 15 years, 2/3 of all federal grants and special tax credits to businesses have been awarded to large corporations. Additionally, federal agencies who have given the private sector hundreds of billions of dollars in loans, loan guarantees, and bailout assistance. Buoyed by this federal assistance, major corporations are uniquely capable of complying with the complex regulations, which in some cases they assist in writing. The result is government-induced market concentration and borderline oligopoly in a number of different industries. Crony capitalism is not capitalism. Moving the goalposts to decide which businesses succeed is detrimental to our economic system in the long run. And in the end, it's the middle class that suffers. Middle-class wages have stagnated over the last 40 years, while productivity has increased. Income inequality has been increasing steadily since the 1970s, and now has reached levels not seen since 1928, the year before the stock market crash. The extended marginalization that this produces is partially masked by our criminal justice system. The United States currently holds over 2 million people in its prisons and jails. We incarcerate more people per capita than any other nation in the world. This mass incarceration disguises the real unemployment rate and exacerbates inequality. If all people who are not looking for work because they are behind bars were factored into this equation, the unemployment rate would be higher than it is presented. 1 out of every 31 adults in the United States are under some form of correctional control. Now that includes not just prisons and jails, but also those on probation and parole. Black males currently have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison in their lifetime. The troubling statistics go on and on. It is abundantly clear that our criminal justice system is in need of reform. Not only is the system ethically questionable, but it's also costing taxpayers an enormous amount of money. The root cause of many of the criminal justice system's failings is over-criminalization. As more and more behaviors have become criminalized, incarceration rates have increased, and more opportunities have been created for police to make mistakes in the apprehension of suspects. This, in turn, has resulted in the heightened racial tensions that we've seen in recent years. There are currently over 4,500 federal criminal statutes and over 300,000 federal regulations that can lead to criminal charges. And it's estimated that 70% of Americans, adults that is, usually unwittingly, commit a crime for which they could be imprisoned. This needs to change. We're at a unique point in time where legislators across the political spectrum recognize that reform is needed. And it's estimated that proper revisions would take years to draft. I have the expertise to contribute to such an undertaking. Electing me to Congress would mean sending someone to Washington who would not be entangled in the two-party entrenchment. Someone who would stand up against corporate welfare. Someone who would fight for individual liberty and limited government by way of decriminalization and regulatory reform. This district has an opportunity to make a statement in this election. We have an opportunity to say that we will not be held hostage by the major parties who no longer represent our interests. I want to be your representative. I want to represent your interests. If you're with me, I'll need your help. I'm going to need more than your vote. I will first need your signature during the petition period in June and July to get onto the ballot. And I'll need your help in spreading this message to your friends and your neighbors. So I ask you to contribute, sign up to volunteer, receive updates. You can do all of this through my website at PassickForCongress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at David Pasick or find me on Facebook. Together, I believe we can do this. And together, I think that we can make history. Thank you very much.
You can sit if you want or stand, whatever you guys want to do.
Mr. Pasick, since your interview on February 25th, you have had a chance to review the Iran nuclear deal. Do you continue to support this deal given the violations of sanctions that Iran has enacted?
So the interview that I had on February 25th, I did review some of the details having to do with the Iran nuclear deal, and I do stand by what I had said in that original interview, which is the nuclear deal was reviewed by and was given sort of a seal of approval, I suppose, by a number of nuclear physicists. So given that the structure of the deal was given a seal of approval by a consensus of scientists, I do stand by the deal, and there is an international sort of review committee, and if sanctions, if there are violations of the deal and sanctions need to be imposed, then so be it. So I believe the structure of the deal is legitimate. And I suppose from a libertarian standpoint, taking the stance, I suppose, of non-interventionism.
Oh, I'm sorry, your time's up, so we're going to keep this just...
Oh,
well, I don't know what that,
I apologize. You have a 1 minute response.
Okay.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
all right. Do I stay or?
No,
yeah,
actually,
we'll
rotate.
Okay.
Yep.
Go relatively quickly.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Pasick, what is your view of the Second Amendment?
I'm pro-Second Amendment. I like most of the candidates here, believe that the SAFE Act, aside from, and I know this is a state issue, but aside from being unconstitutional, the way that legislation was passed was questionable at best, given that it was rushed through in the middle of the night. So I myself am a hunter. I'm an outdoorsman. So I would support Second Amendment protections. And I think the biggest threat that we will see at the federal level would be restrictions on manufacturing. So things like microstamping and other manufacturing, I guess, regulations is what we'd have to watch out for, and and I wouldn't support. Additionally, we talk about leading into gun violence. So as a criminologist, as someone that has a background in researching crime data, really what's driving, well, next time.
Back up to Mr. Pasick. Would you push for each bill to stand alone? That is, getting rid of all excess, can't read the word in bills. Oh, actually, it may be excess pork, and then yes, it may be excess pork in bills.
Well, yeah, I think pork barrel spending is certainly a problem at the federal level. So inserting you know, line items into bills that benefit one's constituency, you know, it can have it benefits in the short term. So I believe, you know, inserting, so earmarks, I think, is another term that we can add to this. Earmarks are a problem. So if you have the spirit of a bill being undermined by all sorts of extraneous different things that are just sort of lopped in ad hoc, then you run into problems. That policy, that law, is then undermined, and it really makes voting complicated because if you're not voting on it because of all the extraneous material that's in the bill, then you may be criticized for voting against it. So yeah, I would say eliminating pork and eliminating earmarks is a good practice.
Thank you. Mr. Pasick, what, if anything, should be done about how EPA regulations have impacted the coal industry?
So a general statement I would say about the EPA is that it has overstepped its bounds in a number of areas. By the same token, I think that federal agencies are only able to regulate industries that they have the ability to regulate. What I mean by that is, say, the IRS or even the criminal justice system are really only able to go after the fish that they're able to catch. So if the coal industry has enough influence, power, money, and influence, such that EPA regulations don't have enough teeth to get into them, I think, so I don't know if I'm answering this question directly or not. That is to say, on one hand, you have regulatory agencies that, you know, just for instance, I just read about a case in Virginia where a private, you know, an individual had put in a pond on his property, and because of, you know, some arcane, you know, regulatory structure, he was fined $16 million to do so. So the EPA, I mean, it's all over the place. So.
Mr. Pasick, same question. What would your top 3 priorities be to best serve the 22nd district?
Yeah, so in terms of economics, because I think, you know, just a quick personal story. My family moved away when I was 10 because of economic conditions in this region. So I made my way back here. I made it a point to make my way back here after I, you know, went to college and all of that. So I think really what's on the minds of most people in this district is how to improve the economy. And as I said in my opening statement, I believe corporate welfare and crony capitalism is really something that threatens our economic model going forward. And I think policies that, you know, are only 1 or 2 years, the short-sightedness, I believe, of a lot of economic policy is really what's causing long-term detrimental effects to our economy. So ending crony capitalism, ending corporate welfare would be priority number 1. Number 2, and I think this plays in with this additionally, also as I said.
Mr. Pasick, America keeps some 28,000 troops in South Korea. In 2012, South Korea's GDP was $1.7 trillion. Is it time for America to pull out and make South Korea pay for its own defense?
I would say yes. I think the influence or the presence of the American military abroad should be drawn down. And just a couple of points on this in general. I don't think that that America should serve as the world's police, and that there needs to be more international involvement in conflicts abroad. are strategic locations where the United States needs to be, but if there are bases, if there are military installations that really are no longer serving their purpose, or is really only to the benefit of, it seems in this case that we're serving as a military for another country. I'm a supporter of the military, while at the same time our presence virtually everywhere in the world, it needs to end.
Mr. Pasick, please comment on this administration's handling of the Veterans Administration.
I would say that the lack of care that a number of individuals have I think Assemblywoman Tenney spoke to this just now, the amount of time that a number of veterans have had to wait. I've also heard stories, I heard one recently regarding in vitro fertilization, that there was a returning service member that was unable to reproduce, for lack of a better term, aside from scientific techniques. Wasn't able to get funding, wanted to start a family, and I thought that was troubling. That someone had served our country, was injured in his service, and wasn't able to start a family. So I think that's problematic, and I think we owe an enormous debt of gratitude to anyone that serves this country, particularly those that are injured.
I want to alert the candidates, this is going to be the last round of questions. After this round, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to summarize or add anything you want, and we'll continue going in the same order. But this is going to be the last round of questions. Mr. Pasick, if elected to Congress, what, if any, position would you take relative to Common Core?
As a general rule, I would say that broad-scale federal policy is by and large inappropriate. So Common Core, I think, is a good example of this, where here in New York you have a number of parents that are opting out of having their children take standardized tests. So I think Common Core and many other broad-scale federal policies are one-size-fits-none policies. And I think it also reduces the autonomy and really the self-efficacy of teachers. And it's kind of disheartening disheartening for teachers that they don't have the power over their own classroom. And then you have them teaching to the test and really undermining what is supposed to happen in the classroom. And I can speak personally to that as an educator, that if you feel empowered and you feel free to teach your students, and the government actually trusts in you and your expertise to educate people, then I think that's what needs to happen, rather than teaching to tests, which is proving to be effective. Autocracy, that is government of the wealthy. And I think it speaks, I don't know if it speaks volumes, but I think it says something to consider who's here tonight. So I'm talking about all the candidates here versus who's not here. And really that's as far as I'll go, because the terms of tonight was that you get your own message out. But I do think it is worth thinking about for voters and everyone in general. Again, is to consider who took the time to come out here and actually speak and be engaged with this event. But back to my points. I think we're at a precipice, we're at a point in this country when the third parties really need to become an option. I think the appeal of my candidacy is a mechanism. It's a mechanism for you, the voter, to fight back against an entrenched two-party system that is not functioning. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the past two congressional sessions were the least productive in American history. And again, one mechanism to remedy that is to have other voices involved. And it's not to predict the future for if a major party candidate is elected to this position, but I think it stands to reason that given the pressure of towing the party line, you may see more of the same. And it's one of the reasons why the previous holder or the previous representative left off.